What if Edmure Tully refused to attack the twins and instead marched his Riverlords north to crown Jon Snow? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The sun is barely up when they bring him out. 2 Lannister guards walk him across the causeway between Riverrun's outer gate and the negotiating ground near the floodplain. Edmure Tully does not resist. He has been a prisoner long enough to know the difference between resistance and waste, and crossing a causeway in borrowed clothes with his hands bound is neither the time nor the place. He looks at the castle as they walk him out. The red and blue of House Tully still flies above the towers. His uncle held it. He is glad of that, at least. Jaime Lannister is waiting for him on the other side. He is exactly what Edmure remembers from the war. Tall, golden, the kind of handsome that feels deliberate. The gold hand catches the early light. Jaime watches him approach with the patient expression of a man who has already decided how this conversation ends and is simply waiting for the other man to arrive at the same conclusion. They stand 4 feet apart. Behind Jaime, the Lannister host stretches across the floodplain. It is a significant army. Edmure does not look at it for long. "My lord," Jaime says. "Sir Jaime," Edmure says. Jaime lets the silence run a moment. Then he says, "There is something Edmure should know." He says it the way a man delivers news he has been carrying for a while, waiting for the right moment. He tells Edmure that Roslyn is well. He tells Edmure she had a son. Edmure goes still. He knew she was with child when the wedding happened. He has spent years in Frey cells thinking about it. He has never let himself think too hard about whether the child lived, because thinking too hard about that made everything else impossible to bear. He has passed the time with other thoughts. The state of the garrison, how long the food stores might last, whether the Blackfish has been sending ravens. Practical thoughts, safe thoughts. Jaime watches his face. He lets the silence do its work. "A boy," Edmure says finally. "A healthy one." Edmure looks at the ground for a moment. Just a moment. Then he looks up at the castle again. His face has gone flat and careful, which is the only kind of control he has left. Jaime tells him what he is offering. Casterly Rock, comfortable quarters, a life with his wife and his son. The boy will be given lands when he comes of age, a proper upbringing, an education that befits his station. Edmure will want for nothing. The price, Jaime says, is simple. Lower the drawbridge. Order the garrison to stand down. Let this end without more blood. Edmure looks at him. "And Riverrun," he says. Jaime's expression does not change. He says Aemon Frey will hold Riverrun under Lannister authority. Edmure nods slowly, the way a man nods when he is hearing something he already knew. "My son grows up a Lannister ward," he says, "at Casterly Rock, and Riverrun belongs to Freys." He says it without inflection, like he is repeating back a translation to make sure he has understood correctly. That is the offer. It is a generous offer, Jaime says. For a long moment, Edmure says nothing. He turns and looks at the castle again. The trout banners move in the light morning wind. He can see a figure on the ramparts, the Blackfish, most likely, watching the negotiation the way the Blackfish watches everything. Like a man already deciding how fast he is going to have to move. "My father built something here," Edmure says. "His father before him. The Tullys have held that castle for generations." He looks back at Jaime. "My son will know that. He will know what his family is, and what it means to carry that name. What I just described cannot happen if I hand Riverrun over to a Frey and ride to Casterly Rock to live quietly on Lannister gold for the rest of my life. The boy needs more than comfort. He needs something to inherit." Jaime studies him. He says Edmure is being sentimental. "I am being a lord," Edmure says, and he says he refuses. For a moment, Jaime is very still. Then he turns and makes a small gesture with his gold hand. 3 men near the siege equipment at the edge of the camp look up. A 4th lays his hand on a length of rope attached to the frame of the nearest catapult. Jaime looks back at Edmure. He speaks quietly and without particular emphasis. He tells Edmure there is an infant boy at the twins right now, that the boy sleeps in a room near the east tower, that the distance from that room to the base of Riverrun's walls is well within the reach of that catapult, if a man were to load it correctly and give the word. He says this the way a man might describe the weather. Edmure looks at the catapult. He looks at the man with his hand on the rope. He looks at Jaime Lannister's green eyes. "Build it," Edmure says. Jaime blinks. "If you're going to do it," Edmure says, "build it. Ride to the twins. Bring the boy here." His voice is level. And then ask yourself what that means for every lord in Westeros when word gets out what the Lannisters did to an infant hostage because they could not take a castle. Ask yourself what it does to every alliance you are trying to hold. Ask yourself what it does to your sister's reign before it has started. He looks at Jaime without blinking. You are not going to do it. We both know it. So lower your hand and we can stop pretending. For a long moment, nobody moves. Then Jaime makes another gesture, and the man by the catapult steps back. Jaime looks at Edmure a moment longer. Whatever he is thinking does not reach his face. He turns and walks back toward the Lannister lines without another word. Edmure watches him go. His wrists are still bound. His hands, pressed together in front of him, are not quite steady. He does not let the guards see that. Over near the Frey encampment, a tall figure on horseback has been watching the exchange from outside the lines. Brienne of Tarth sits straight in the saddle, her short blonde hair pushed flat by her helm, the hilt of Oathkeeper visible above her right shoulder. She has been here for 4 days, trying to negotiate passage to speak with the Blackfish. It has not gone anywhere. The Freys do not like her. The Lannisters do not trust her. The Blackfish will not leave the castle to meet her at the gate, and the gate will not open for her, and she has been sitting here on her horse, watching a war she cannot effect. She watched Edmure Tully's face during the negotiation. She is good at reading faces. She has been on enough battlefields to know what it looks like when a man decides something and means it. His expression when Jaime made the catapult threat was not fear. It was the flat, deliberate calm of a man calling a bluff he has already thought through. She watches him being walked back toward the castle gate now. She watches the Lannister commanders conferring in low voices with their backs to her. She watches the Frey riders milling near their own fires without any particular purpose. Something settles in her expression. She turns her horse around and rides. She does not explain to Podrick, who follows a moment later at a trot, confused. There is nothing to explain. She has been sent to bring the Tully forces north to Jon Snow. The Blackfish would not move. But something else is moving now, and she does not know yet what it is or where it leads. What she knows is that the road home runs north. She rides, and the Lannister camp falls away behind her, and the morning is cold and clear, and the road ahead is long. Inside Riverrun, the garrison hands Edmure back at the inner gate, and he walks the rest of the way alone. The men on the walls and in the yard are watching him, the way soldiers watch when they are trying to understand what happened and whether it was good or very bad. He keeps his face steady for them. The Blackfish is waiting in the great hall. He is standing with his arms crossed, watching the door, which means he has been standing that way for a while. He is the kind of man who is always already in position before things arrive. He watches Edmure cross the hall without speaking. Edmure tells him what was offered and what he said. The Blackfish listens. When Edmure finishes, there is a short silence. Then the Blackfish puts one hand on Edmure's shoulder. Briefly, without ceremony, the way a soldier acknowledges something that does not need a speech. "Now we hold," he says. That is all. Edmure goes to find a window. He stands at the high window in the east tower for a long time, looking down at the Lannister banners spread across the floodplain. They are still there. The army is still there. The siege is not over. All he has done is refuse to end it on their terms, which is a very different thing from ending it on his. The river moves below, cold and flat, catching the light. The trout banners above him move in the wind. He thinks about a boy he has never held, sleeping in a room at the Twins. He thinks about what that boy will be told about his father when he is old enough to ask. He thinks about whether the answer to that question is worth anything, and he decides that it is. He decides it is worth quite a lot. His hands are not steady. He presses them against the cold stone ledge and waits until they are. Then he goes to find the Maester. There are ravens to send. They come at dawn. 300 Lannister soldiers move up the narrow causeway toward Riverrun's outer gate, shields up, ladders angled forward, moving in the tight, disciplined formation that Jaime Lannister's armies are known for. The morning is grey and cold, and the river runs dark on either side of the causeway. It is a good morning for a siege. It is not a good morning for the men holding the ladders. The Blackfish is on the walls. He has been on the walls since before the soldiers started moving. He does not sleep much, and he does not waste what wakefulness he has. He stands above the outer gate with a bow across his back and 3 of the garrison's best archers beside him, and he watches the Lannister column come up the causeway with the patient expression of a man who has seen this particular mistake before. He waits until the column is fully committed, packed in tight with the river on both sides, and no room to scatter. Then he gives the order. The arrows come down in sheets. The causeway is narrow, and the men have nowhere to go. The ladders clatter against the stones. Edmure watches from the east tower, his hands on the parapet, and he doesn't look away because this is what he chose, and he is going to witness every part of it. The assault breaks in under 10 minutes. The Lannister soldiers pull back from the causeway in good order. They are professional enough for that. But they leave equipment behind, and they leave men behind, and the men they leave behind are not getting up. The Blackfish watches them go. He does not celebrate. He tells the archers to save their remaining bolts and goes to check the gate braces. Across the floodplain, Jaime Lannister watches the column come back. He stands outside his command tent, with his arms crossed and his gold hand catching what little light there is. His officers wait behind him at a respectful distance. None of them are in any hurry to speak first. Jaime watches the men filing back through the camp. He watches the gaps in the column where men should be. He counts those gaps without moving his lips. He already knew this was how it would go. Riverrun is a triangle of stone at the junction of 2 rivers with water on 3 sides and a narrow causeway on the 4th. It does not fall to a frontal assault. It falls to starvation or to treachery or to the kind of political leverage he just used and failed. He knows all of this. He knew it before he ordered the assault. He ordered it anyway because he needed to know for certain. And now he knows. He turns and goes inside his tent. He tells his officers to set proper siege lines. Tighten the perimeter. Control the water approaches to make sure no supply boats get through to the castle. He speaks without particular anger because anger is not useful here. They write down his orders and leave. Jaime sits at his field table and thinks. The garrison is not large. a few hundred men at most. They can hold against assault, but they cannot hold indefinitely against supply blockade, which means this siege will be won the old slow way, the way Tywin Lannister used to win things, which Jaime has always found boring, weeks of waiting, possibly months. He has a war to get back to, and a sister to answer to, and neither of those things is going to wait patiently for him to starve out a Tully holdout in the Riverlands. He pulls a piece of parchment toward him and picks up a quill. The message he sends to King's Landing is short. Riverrun has not fallen. The siege continues. He does not elaborate on what happened at the negotiating ground, because the elaboration will not improve the news, and he has never seen the point of dressing a bad raven in good plumage. He seals it and sends it before he can second-guess the wording. 3 days later, in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister reads it. The city has barely stopped smelling of smoke. The great sept of Baelor is gone. She made sure of it, and she does not regret it. And the sky above King's Landing is still carrying traces of what she did, and she finds she does not mind looking at them. She is sitting in the throne room because she lives here now, fully and without qualification, and she intends to be seen living here. The Iron Throne is behind her. She has not sat in it yet today. She is standing at the window with the raven in her hand, reading it a second time. Her golden hair is loose. Her green eyes are flat. She reads, "Riverrun has not fallen. The siege continues." Her first thought is that Jaime underestimated the man. She told him to use the child as leverage, and Edmure Tully called the bluff, which means either the bluff was obvious, or Edmure Tully is braver than she gave him credit for, and she is not sure which is worse. Her second thought is arithmetic. She has the Lannister forces in the field, which are stretched. She has the city, which is fortified and hers. She has the Freys holding the twins and controlling the crossings of the Green Fork, which is worth something, though the Freys are becoming worth less with every passing season. She does not have a spare army to send south. She does not have the numbers. She looks at the raven a moment longer, then holds it to the candle flame on the table beside her and watches it catch. She will deal with the Riverlands when she has something to deal with it. Right now she has a throne to establish and a realm to convince, and Daenerys Targaryen sailing toward her shores with dragons, and Edmure Tully holding a castle in the Riverlands is the smallest of those three problems. He can hold it. For now, he can hold it. She turns away from the window and goes to find Qyburn. There are other matters. Back at Riverrun, 2 days after the assault, Edmure calls a war council. It is not a large gathering. The Blackfish, the Master-at-Arms, the Steward, 2 senior knights who have been with the garrison since before Edmure returned. They sit around the table in the great hall that Edmure's father sat in, and they talk about numbers. The food stores are better than expected. The Blackfish had been provisioning against a siege before the Lannister army arrived, because the Blackfish expects bad things and prepares for them. They have grain enough for 4 months, if they are careful. Water is not a concern. The rivers give them that. Arrow stocks are lower after the morning's work, but the Fletcher in the garrison can replace what was spent faster than the Lannisters can replace the men who carried them. The Blackfish gives his assessment flat and without theatre. They can hold. 6 months, perhaps more if the Lannisters do not build a proper counter-wall. The question is not whether Riverrun can be held. The question is what they are holding it for. Edmure hears him out. He looks at the table for a long moment. He tells them he has sent ravens. He does not tell them yet to whom. He says they will know more in time, and that for now the answer to the Blackfish's question is the same answer it has always been. They hold it because it is theirs, and because letting it go means letting the Lannisters close their fist over the Riverlands permanently, and because some things are worth the months of cold and short rations just for the principle of the matter. The Blackfish looks at him across the table. He does not agree or disagree. He nods once and stands up, because there is always something to check on the walls, and the Blackfish would rather be checking it than sitting still. The others filter out. Edmure stays at the table for a while after they have gone, turning a cup of water in his hands, looking at the banners hanging in the great hall. The trout. Blue and red. His father's colours and his grandfather's colours, and whatever this son of his will inherit, it will include this hall and those banners, if Edmure holds long enough to make that mean something. He goes to bed before the evening meal. Midnight finds Jaime Lannister awake in his tent. He has a candle lit and a piece of parchment in front of him, and a quill in his left hand, because his right hand cannot hold a quill, and he has had to relearn everything, and he is still not entirely used to it. He has been staring at the parchment for a while now. He has written the opening 3 times, and crossed it out 3 times. He is trying to write to Cersei, and he cannot find the beginning. Not because he does not know what to say. He knows exactly what to say. He failed to take Riverrun. The Tully Lord refused to be leveraged. The siege will take months if it can be won at all, and there are things that need doing in the capital that are not getting done because he is sitting in a field in the Riverlands. He knows all of this. He knows how to write it. The problem is that he can hear her voice already. He can hear the precise register of her reaction when she reads it, can feel the particular weight of what it will cost him when he gets back. Not in any dramatic way, but in the small daily way that 2 people who have known each other their whole lives cost each other things. He knows that register. He has been hearing it for 30 years. He crosses out the beginning a 4th time. Outside his tent, the siege camp is quiet. The fires have burned low. Somewhere across the water, Riverrun is dark, except for the watch lanterns on the walls, the small points of orange light that mean the garrison is still there, still manned, still holding. He can see them from the tent opening if he turns his head. He does not turn his head. He sets down the quill. He folds the blank parchment in half and puts it aside. Tomorrow he will write it plainly and send it, and whatever she says, she will say, and there is no version of the words that changes the fact underneath them. The candle burns a while longer. Then he puts it out and tries to sleep. Weeks pass between Riverrun and Winterfell. In the north, Jon Snow fights for his home on a field south of the castle walls. He fights outnumbered, his line pressed to breaking, men dying around him in the mud, and at the last moment, when it looks like the ground itself is going to swallow him, the Knights of the Vale arrive and the battle turns. Ramsay Bolton dies. Winterfell's gates open. Jon Snow walks back through them into a courtyard he grew up in, and stands there a moment looking at the walls before anyone can speak to him. The dire wolf banners go up before nightfall. He should feel triumphant. He feels tired and quieter than he was before, and like he left something in that field that he will not be getting back. Rickon is buried in the crypt beside his father, beside all the Starks who went before them. Jon does not say much at the burial. He does not need to say anything, because the weight of the moment says it for him, and the look on Sansa's face says the rest. When it is over, he stands above the grave for a while in the cold, and then he goes back to running a kingdom he did not ask for and did not want, and cannot find anyone else to take. A fortnight after the battle, the Northern Lords come to Winterfell. They come in 1s and 2s, some still bandaged from the fighting, some who were not at the fighting and are coming now because they did not come then, and they know it. The great hall fills up. The fires are lit. The long tables are set. Men who haven't spoken since before the Red Wedding find themselves seated next to each other, with nothing to do but pour wine and pretend the years between them didn't happen. Jon sits at the high table and watches them settle, and thinks about how small the hall looks with half the faces missing. The first to speak is not one of the lords. She is small enough that when she stands, half the room cannot see her over the table. But they hear her. Nobody in a room has ever had trouble hearing Lyanna Mormont, Lady of Bear Island, even when she is barely as tall as a sword is long. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. She looks down the table at Lord Robert Glover, and she says his name clearly, and she says that House Glover refused the call of House Stark. She says that when Jon Snow was taking back the North, Glover was in his hall, and that Bear Island knew no king but the king in the North, whose name was Stark. She says that where were you? Robert Glover has nothing to say to that does him any credit, so he does not say anything. She looks at Lord Clay Serwyn next, and says the same, and Lord Clay Serwyn stares at the table. She looks around the room, at every face that should have been on that battlefield and was not, and she says they are all here now because they were shamed into it, or scared into it, or calculated their way into it, and that is fine. She will take them either way, because the North needs them, and Winter does not care about their excuses. The hall is very quiet. Then Lord Wyman Manderley stands up. He is a large man, and when he stands, it means something. He looks at Jon Snow at the high table, and he calls him the White Wolf. He says the name of Stark, and he says King in the North, and he draws his sword and holds it up, and the steel catches the firelight, and the room holds its breath for 1 second. Then every sword in the hall comes up. It starts with Manderley, and it moves through the room like a wave, lord to lord, bench to bench, steel scraping against scabbard all down the long tables, until every man who had a sword is holding it, and every man who did not wishes he had brought one. The sound of it fills the hall and goes up into the rafters, and probably up through the floors above. Robert Glover stands with his sword raised and his jaw tight. Clay Serwyn stands with his sword raised and looks like he is trying not to show how relieved he is to have a reason to stand. Lyanna Mormont sits back down with the satisfied expression of a person who has made her point. Jon Snow does not stand up right away. He sits at the high table, looking at all of it. His dark brown hair falls across his forehead. His grey eyes move from face to face, and what is in them is not pride, and it is not triumph. He looks like a man who has been handed something heavier than he expected, and is now re-evaluating whether his arms can take the weight. But he stands up. He does not give a speech. He says he will not forget who was in this hall, and who came when they were asked, and who held the North when there was nothing to hold it with but stubbornness. He says the North's debts are long, and he intends to pay them. He says he will need all of them. That is enough. The swords come down. The hall breathes again. Sansa Stark watches all of this from the seat near the high table that her mother used to occupy. Her auburn hair catches the firelight, red gold like copper, and her blue eyes are steady and attentive, the way eyes are when a person is thinking several things at once and not saying any of them. She is proud of Jon. She is. She watches him accept the title with that reluctant gravity, and she thinks he will be a good king, which is not the same as what she thinks about herself and the future, and all the things she has not yet said out loud. She looks toward the back of the hall. Petter Baelish is standing near the far wall, where the shadows pool between the torches. He is not cheering. Every other man in the room is cheering, or at least performing it convincingly. And Petyr Baelish is standing still, with his hands clasped in front of him, and his pointed beard and his dark eyes catching no particular light. He is looking at her. She holds the look for one breath, maybe two. His expression does not change. He does not nod or smile or signal anything with his face. He simply stands there, quiet in the noise, and she knows what he is doing. He is reminding her that he is still here, that the army outside is still his, that the calculation he offered her before the battle is still on the table. She looks away first. Back to Jon. Back to the hall. She does not show anything on her face. Later, after the lords have eaten and drunk and the hall has thinned out, Jon finds her near the door to the corridor. He is still wearing the expression from the ceremony, the weight of it sitting on him. He looks at her and says something that is almost a question. He says he is not sure he deserves it. Sansa looks at him for a moment. She tells him that is exactly why he does. She says it plainly, without softness, because that is the kind of thing that lands harder without a cushion under it. He almost laughs. Not quite. He looks at the empty hall and nods slowly, the way a man nods when he has accepted a thing without fully believing it yet. She watches him go. She stays in the doorway a moment longer, thinking about something she has not told him, about the conversation with Petyr Baelish before the battle, about the letter she sent to the Vale, about the 1,000 little calculations she has been making since she rode away from Ramsay Bolton and into a world where she has to be the one making calculations, because no one else is going to do it correctly. She has not told Jon any of it. Not yet. She is not sure when yet will arrive. She turns and walks down the corridor toward the family solar, and the torches gutter in her wake, and Winterfell settles around her like an old coat that still mostly fits. And far south, at the same moment, a raven lifts from a tower at Riverrun. Edmure's hand is the last thing on its leg before it goes. He has tied the message himself, a short one, the kind that means the important thing is not the words, but the fact that they were sent at all. The raven turns once over the castle, catching the updraft from the river, and then angles north. The message is addressed to Jon Snow, king in the north, Winterfell. It says, "Hold the north. We are coming." The twins sit astride the green fork like two fists pressed together at the knuckle. 2 towers, 2 bridges, 1 lord who has held both for longer than most men live, who has used them to squeeze tolls and oaths and marriages and wars out of every traveller who needed to cross, who sat in his hall the night of the Red Wedding and called it good business. The towers are dark against the night sky, except for the torches in the yard and the light from the windows of the great hall, and the guards on the walls are bored and cold, and not looking at anything in particular, which is the way guards usually are when they have been standing on the same wall for too long. None of them notice the serving girl who walks across the yard. She is not remarkable. She is the kind of face you have already forgotten before she has finished passing you. She carries a tray. She is heading for the great hall door. The guard's eyes slide off her the way eyes slide off furniture, and she walks through the door and closes it behind her. Inside, the hall is lit with torches and mostly empty. Lord Walder Frey is at the head of the long table. He is ancient in the way that some men are, not merely old but desiccated, like something that outlasted its own vitality through sheer obstinacy and spite. He is eating. The fire in the hearth throws his shadow long behind him up the wall, and he does not seem to notice that the hall is unusually quiet or that his sons are unusually absent. He has called for them twice. No one has come. He is eating the pie and waiting for someone to explain it to him, in the way a man waits when he is too important to go looking for answers himself. The serving girl refills his cup. He does not look at her. He is looking at the pie, and at the door, and back at the pie. He takes another bite. The fire crackles. Outside, very distantly, a horse moves in the yard. "Where are my sons?" he asks. He says it to the room. He does not particularly expect the serving girl to have an answer. She tells him they are right here. He looks at her then. She is still facing away, still setting down the wine jug. There is something in the way she said it that catches at something in him, and he does not know yet what that something is. But his hand stops halfway to his cup. She turns. She lifts the edge of the pie crust, and she tells him to look. He looks. For a long moment, the only sound in the hall is the fire. Walder Frey's face does what faces do when the mind inside them is working through something that should not be possible, moving from incomprehension to comprehension to the specific grey horror that comes after. He pushes back from the table. The cup tips, and the wine bleeds across the cloth. The serving girl reaches up and peels off her own face. It comes away cleanly, and underneath it is a different face entirely. Dark hair, a lean jaw, grey eyes, the kind of face that has been through things that have stripped it down to whatever is underneath and left something harder and quieter and more deliberate than the girl who started out. She stands there looking at him across the table, and she is not performing anything. She is simply present, the way a person is present when there is nothing left to conceal. Arya Stark looks at Walder Frey. She tells him she has been waiting for this for a long time. She says the name of the Red Wedding quietly and without drama, the way you name something that does not need decoration to be what it is. She tells him she looked up to the top of the list and she went down it, and his name was on it. And here she is, and here he is. She takes a step toward him. He is trying to get out of his chair. His legs are not cooperating. He is old and frightened, and the chair is high, and he is trying to shout for the guards, and what comes out is not as loud as he needs it to be. She tells him the last thing he will see is a Stark smiling down at him. She does not smile in a cheerful way. She smiles in the way of someone who has carried a thing a very long distance and is putting it down now, finally, on the exact spot where it belongs. She draws the knife from her belt. It is quick. It is not cruel. She is a faceless man, or near enough, and they do not do this slowly. Walder Frey dies in his chair, at the head of his own table, with the remains of the pie in front of him, and his sons in the crust, and a Stark girl standing over him in the firelight. She stays with him for a moment afterward. It is not gloating. It is something more like acknowledgement. The Red Wedding happened in a hall like this one, at a table like this one, and she was not there for it and could not have stopped it. But she is here for this, and she stood over him and meant what she said. She is satisfied, not happy. Satisfied is different. Across the corridor, through the wall, in a room she knows the layout of because she learned the layout of everything before she came in, Roslyn Frey sits beside a cradle in the candlelight. She is not asleep. She has been sitting there the way new mothers sit, watching a thing so small and fragile that the watching feels like a way of keeping it safe. The baby is breathing. She can see the rise and fall of it. She has her hands folded in her lap, and she is very still. And she is listening to the castle, the way people listen when they can feel that something is wrong but cannot yet name it. She does not know what has happened in the Great Hall. Not yet. Her baby breathes. She watches. The candle makes small shadows on the ceiling above the cradle, and the baby is alive. And Rosalind Frey stays in that room and does not understand yet that the world changed 3 walls away, that the man who made her husband a weapon and her wedding a massacre is dead, that the thing that has been hanging over her husband's family for years has just been cut down in the hall where it lived. She keeps watching her son breathe. The night continues. Aria walks out of the twins the same way she walked in. She does not run. She is not in a hurry. Running is for people who are not sure they did the right thing and need the distance to feel safer about it. She walks across the yard and through the gate and out onto the bridge, and the night air is cold and smells like the river. She stands on the bridge for a moment. The green fork runs below her, black and steady, the torches in the yard behind her, the dark country ahead. She is heading north. She has been heading north since she got back to Westeros. She has been making stops along the way, crossing names off a list. This was the last stop. Everything else is north. She walks. By the time she has been gone an hour, the guards have still not found what is in the Great Hall. By the time they find it, she is 3 miles from the twins with the river behind her. By the time anyone thinks to send riders after a serving girl, there is no serving girl. There is only the dark road and the cold and the sound of her boots on the ground. At dawn, the twins wakes up without a lord. The guards stand in the yard in groups of 3 and 4, and nobody knows who is in charge. A rider saddles a horse to bring word to Jaime Lannister's camp at Riverrun, and then cannot decide if that is his decision to make. The Frey heirs argue in an antechamber about what this means for the succession, and do not agree on anything. The cook cries in the kitchen for reasons that are partly grief and partly terror, and partly the specific misery of having been made complicit in something without being told. Rosalind Frey sits in her room and holds her son, and waits to understand what is happening. The rider does not leave for Riverrun until mid-morning, and far south, in the east tower of Riverrun, Edmure Tully wakes up before dawn and lies still in the dark, and cannot say what is different. The siege is still there. The Lannister banners are still on the floodplain. Nothing has changed that he can see or hear or name. But something has shifted. Something that was pressing against him from a direction he couldn't quite locate has gone quiet. He lies on his back in the dark and breathes and tries to identify it and cannot. He gets up. He goes to the window. The river is dark and the camp fires are low. He does not know what changed in the night. He only knows that he slept, for the first time in weeks, without dreaming about a room at the twins. He watches the dawn come up, and waits for the day to tell him what it knows. The rider comes at a hard gallop from the northeast, pushing his horse past the point of courtesy, and the men at the edge of Jaime's camp hear him before they see him. He is a Frey man. He has been riding since before dawn, and it shows. He pulls up at the first Lannister picket he finds, and says he has an urgent message for Sir Jaime, and someone needs to take him there right now. The picket looks at his face and takes him. Jaime is at his field table, reviewing supply inventories, when the man is brought in. He reads the message once. He reads it again. He sets it down on the table and looks at it. Walder Frey is dead. 2 of his sons with him. No one knows who killed them. No one knows who is in command at the twins. He goes to his tent opening and looks out at the camp. The Frey contingent is already different. He can see it before anyone has told them anything official. Word spreads through an army the way weather does, ahead of itself, and the Frey soldiers are shifting in their groups, looking toward their officers looking toward each other. 3 men are arguing near the supply wagons, and not quietly. A Frey captain walks past with the expression of someone who has just been handed a responsibility he didn't want and is trying to decide whether to keep it or put it back down. Jaime watches this for a moment. He does not need to do the mathematics at length. The Frey soldiers are no longer here because they want to be, or because they are loyal to the Lannister cause. They are here because Walder Frey told them to be, and Walder Frey is dead, and the question of who speaks for House Frey now is not a question anyone can answer quickly or cleanly. Without the Frey numbers, his force is sufficient to maintain a perimeter, but not to press any meaningful assault. Without the Frey supply arrangements, his provisions run thin within the month. Without the Frey political weight behind him, his justification for this whole campaign starts to look considerably more fragile, and Riverrun is still standing, having survived the direct assault, having refused the negotiated surrender, and apparently now waiting. He goes back to his table. He does not sit. He issues the withdrawal order quietly in the middle of the morning, without ceremony or announcement. He tells his senior officers that the strategic situation has changed and the siege is no longer viable, and they will pull back in good order by midday. He says it the way he says most things he has decided about, flatly, without elaboration, in a tone that closes the door on argument before argument has a chance to enter. His officers write down the orders and go. He sends no raven to Cersei before the column moves. He has thought about it, and he cannot find a version of that raven that improves anyone's morning, and there will be time enough to explain himself when he arrives in person. Explaining things in person has always been harder, but at least in person he can manage the room. The column begins to pull back from the floodplain around midday. At Riverrun, the first sign is the noise, or rather, the absence of it. The persistent low machinery of a siege camp, the voices, the hammering, the creak of equipment, the sound of several hundred men doing the 1,000 small things that keep an army alive, begins to thin and quiet, and the garrison on the walls notices. They notice the way people notice silence after long noise as a kind of interruption that takes a moment to process. The Blackfish is on the walls before anyone tells him anything. He is always on the walls. He watches the Lannister camp fold itself up from the south end, working northward, the careful practiced efficiency of a professional army that has done this before. Tents coming down, wagons being loaded, standards being furled. He watches until he is certain of what he is seeing, and then he does not allow himself to react to it visibly, because there are soldiers watching him, and the time for celebration is not yet, and maybe not ever. He goes to find Edmure. He does not say anything right away. He leads him up to the east wall parapet and points. Edmure stands beside him and watches the Lannister army diminish across the floodplain. He does not say anything for a long time either. By mid-afternoon, the camp is empty. Abandoned cooking fires still smoke. A tent that was not fully struck flaps in the river wind. The floodplain around Riverrun looks the way a field looks after a market that has packed up and moved on, the ground showing the ghost of where everything was. They ride out through the main gate with 10 men as escort. The Blackfish walks the perimeter of the empty camp while Edmure stands near the remains of the largest cooking fire. It was a large camp, large enough to be a problem for a long time to come if it had held. He nudges a piece of abandoned equipment with his boot, and it clangs dully against the cold ground. The Blackfish comes back to him after a while and stands beside him, looking at the empty field. "Close thing," the Blackfish says. "I know." Edmure says. They stand there a moment in the silence. Then the Blackfish says what Edmure already knew he was going to say, because the Blackfish is a military man, and the military logic here is clear enough that any military man would say it. He says the Twins is sitting there right now with no lord and no heir in position, and Frey men who don't know who to take orders from. He says that Castle controls the only crossing of the Green Fork for hundreds of miles in either direction. He says that if Cersei wants to move men south or north through the Riverlands, she needs that crossing, and right now no one is holding it. He says they have the garrison, they have the horses, they could be at the Twins in 3 days, raise the Tully banners over both towers, seal the crossing, and make it mean something again. He says it sensibly, without heat, laying it out like a map. Edmure listens to all of it. Then he shakes his head. The Blackfish looks at him. He is not angry. He is asking. Edmure is quiet for a moment. He looks north, not dramatically, not like a man in a story pointing toward destiny, just a man looking at the direction he has been thinking about and trying to find the words for why it matters more than the direction behind him. He tells the Blackfish about the raven he sent 3 weeks ago. He explains what he knows about what is happening in the north. Jon Snow, Ned Stark's bastard, who held Castle Black against an army of the dead, and then came back from the wrong side of the living, and then won back Winterfell from the family that took it. The Northern Lords are calling him king in the north. He says he doesn't know Jon Snow personally, and he cannot speak to the man's character with any confidence, but he knows the name Stark, and he knows what that name meant to the Riverlands, when the Riverlands needed it to mean something, and he knows what it meant to his sister. He says Robb Stark went to war with the Riverlands at his back, and it mattered, and it cost them both more than it should have, and he will not pretend that did not happen. But the wall between the north and the Riverlands that the Red Wedding built is made of Frey timber, and Walder Frey is dead, and the timber is rotting. He says the Twins is a castle, important, strategic, worth having, but it is still just a castle, and what Jon Snow is building in the north is something larger than a castle, and when Daenerys Targaryen arrives from across the narrow sea with dragons and an army and the name Targaryen like a sword she was born holding, they will all need to have decided which side of that they are standing on before she lands and asks. He says if they spend the next 3 months retaking the Twins and installing a Tully garrison in 2 towers, they will have the Twins. And they will have missed the moment when the shape of Westeros was still being decided. The Blackfish stands very still through all of this. He is a man who has lived his whole life thinking about ground and position and what a force can hold. He knows the value of the Twins as well as he knows the back of his own hand. He does not think Edmure is wrong about the Twins. He is deciding whether Edmure is right about everything else. He takes a long breath through his nose and looks at the empty floodplain and then back at the castle. "Jon Snow," he says, and it is not quite a question. "Jon Snow," Edmure says. Another silence. The wind comes off the river and moves through the abandoned camp, rattling something metal somewhere in the ghost of it. The Blackfish nods once, the kind of nod that means he has made a decision, and the decision is not going back. He is a soldier. When he picks a ground, he holds it. "Then we had better send more ravens," he says. "If we are going to march a host north, I want to know what we are marching into." Edmure almost smiles. Not quite, but close. He looks north one more time, and then he turns back toward Riverrun's gates, and behind him, the empty flood plain stretches in the afternoon light, and the ghost fires of the Lannister camp smoke quietly away into nothing. The Maester of Riverrun is an old man with ink-stained fingers and the resigned expression of someone who has spent a career transcribing other people's decisions, and he sits in his tower the morning after the Lannister army withdraws and writes what Edmure tells him to write without comment or question, because that is his job. There are 12 ravens, one for the house that holds Pink Maiden in the rolling country south of Riverrun, one for the house at Seaguard, on the bay, one for Raventree Hall, where the ancient Weirwood stands dead and black in the yard, one for Stonehenge, one for Wayfarer's Rest, one for Maiden Pool, and one for Acorn Hall, and one for Lord Harroway's town, and 4 more for the scattered holdings east and south that have been paying Lannister dues and keeping their banners furled, and waiting to see which way the wind was going to blow. Edmure stands at the window while the Maester writes and tells him what to say. He does not dress it in ceremony. He says, "The Lannister siege of Riverrun is finished, and the castle stands." He says, "House Frey is leaderless, and the twins are open." He says, "Jon Snow holds Winterfell, and the northern lords have named him king in the north." He says, "The Riverlands and the north have stood together before, and the time is coming when that will matter again. And he is calling his banners north, and he would know which of his lords are coming with him." He says all of this plainly, the way a man states a fact rather than makes an argument. He has learned something from the last few weeks about what it means to commit to a thing without hedging. He does not hedge. The ravens go at midday. The answers come back over the following days in 1s and 2s, carried by birds from towers he has not heard from in years. Some are cautious. Some are warmer. A few are not quite answers, more like questions that could be construed as yes if he reads them generously, which he does. The house at Seaguard says yes first, quickly, as if they had been waiting for someone to ask. Stonehenge takes 2 days and comes back with conditions, and Edmure sends back a message that acknowledges the conditions without exactly agreeing to them, which is sometimes the same thing. Raventree Hall says yes without conditions and without elaboration, which from that particular house means something significant about how badly they have been waiting for a reason. The Blackfish brings him the tallies each evening, sitting across from him at the table in the great hall. "More than half," the Blackfish says on the 3rd evening. "More than half said yes, or more than half replied?" Edmure asks. "Both," the Blackfish says. "Some of the lords," the Blackfish explains, "are not responding to the merits of the argument. They are responding to the fact of Riverrun. News travels in the Riverlands the way news always travels, faster than the ravens that carry it, supplemented by rumour and rider, and the particular mouths of soldiers who used to be on the Lannister side of that siege and are now heading home. What those soldiers are saying, apparently, is that Edmure Tully had a sword at his throat and did not move, and Jaime Lannister packed his camp and left. That story has reached holdings Edmure's raven hasn't touched yet. Edmure sits with that for a moment. He had not thought about what the siege looked like from outside it. He had been inside it, managing it from the walls and the east tower, thinking about food stocks and arrow counts and whether his son was breathing. He had not thought about what Riverrun standing, week after week, looked like to a lord sitting in a hall 2 days' ride away, watching the Lannister army fail to take it. He thinks about it now. "How long before we can march?" he asks. "A fortnight," the Blackfish says. "If the lords who said yes move quickly, and the lords who said conditions mean yes when they arrive." "They do," Edmure says. And meanwhile, the raven he sent to Winterfell has been flying north. It reaches Winterfell on a grey morning. one of those northern mornings that cannot decide whether it wants to be overcast or clear, and ends up being both. The Maester brings it to Jon Snow in the great hall, where Jon is standing at the long table, looking at a map and a set of supply numbers and trying to reconcile them, which cannot be done because the supply numbers are bad and the map is truthful. He reads the Raven standing. Sansa comes in from the corridor and sees his expression and crosses to him without asking. She reads it over his shoulder. He watches her eyes move across the words. She gets to the end, and she sits down, which is not what he expected. He had expected her to pace, or to think out loud, or to ask him what he makes of it. Instead, she sits and stares at the wall for a long moment like someone totaling a column of numbers. He sets the parchment on the table. "He's held Riverrun," he says. "Against Jaime Lannister," she says. "Yes." "He wants to bring Riverlords to Winterfell." "He wants to call you king," she says. That's what the Raven says. Jon looks at the Raven again. "Hold the north. We are coming. It is short, as promises go. Short enough that it could be a tactic, or a bluff, or a man trying to leverage a distant connection into something he needs." He looks at the words and tries to read the person behind them. He tells Sansa he is not sure they want this. He says it carefully. He says that if he stands here in Winterfell with the Riverlands and the North both behind him, that is not a defensive position anymore. That looks like a king building toward something larger. He says Cersei already has reasons to come north. He does not want to give her more of them. Sansa looks at him. She says, "Cersei does not need reasons." She says the question is not whether Cersei will come, but when, and whether they are standing alone or not when she does. She says the Knights of the Vale are here right now because someone asked for help before the battle and the help arrived. And she says she knows he knows the rest of that story, and she knows there are things about it she has not told him, and she will tell him. But the point is that you take the allies that come to you, and you do not send them away, because accepting help makes you look like you are planning to use it. Jon is quiet for a moment. He asks her if she trusts Edmure Tully. She says she trusts that Edmure Tully held a castle against a Lannister army and refused to be used as a weapon, and is now sending ravens north when the logical play would be to take a leaderless crossing on the Green Fork and sit on it. She says that is not nothing. Jon picks up the Raven. He reads it one more time. He sets it down. He tells her to find the Maester. He wants parchment and ink. He says Edmure Tully and his lords are welcome at Winterfell. She nods. She gets up and goes to find the Maester, and she does not show what she is thinking. But there is a quality to the way she walks out of the room that is something close to relief, and Jon is too honest not to notice it. Pater Baelish learns of the letter that afternoon. He is in the yard when the Maester's boy crosses it, carrying the response south to the rookery, and the boy does not think twice about a lord who asks what he is carrying. He gives an innocent summary. A letter to a Riverlord, positive in tone. Baelish gives the boy a coin and sends him on his way. He stands in the yard for a moment after. He looks at the tower where the ravens are kept, and at the great hall window where Jon Snow's shadow moves behind the glass, and he puts the pieces together with the ease of a man who has been putting pieces together his whole life and is very good at it. Riverlords, coming to Winterfell, coming to call Jon Snow king. He smiles. Not a warm smile, the kind that means something is being measured. He goes up to the ramparts that evening, just before dark, when the yard is quiet and the cold is starting to come in off the hills. He looks south for a while, the way a man looks in the direction of the place that used to be the center of everything he built. King's Landing is a long way away. He has been telling himself that is a temporary condition, that the situation here will resolve itself into something useful, and he will find his way back south and back to the rooms where power actually lives. He looks at his own hands on the stone parapet. He has been the most important man in the north for 2 weeks, the only southern lord here, the only person who arrived with an army and no obligation to Jon Snow, and therefore the only person Jon Snow might need to court rather than simply command. That is leverage. It is good leverage, and he knows how to use it. But Riverlords are coming, and when they arrive, the hall will be full of men who have reasons of their own to be here, old reasons, Riverlands and North reasons that go back further than anything Petyr Baelish built, and his position in the room will be different than it is now. He looks south a moment longer, then looks away. He has time. Not as much as he thought, but time. And he has Sansa, or rather, he has the conversation he has been having with Sansa in the margins of every interaction for 2 years now. The one where she understands more than she shows, and he shows less than he knows, and that conversation is not finished. He goes inside before the dark is complete, because there is nothing useful about standing on a cold wall in the dark, and Petyr Baelish has always preferred rooms to ramparts. The lamp in his quarters burns late that night. They gather in the courtyard of Riverrun at first light. It takes the better part of a week for them all to arrive, the lords and their retinues coming in through the main gate in 1s and 2s over the days following Edmure's call, some with 50 men at their backs, some with less, some with more. They camp in the yards and the outbuildings, and along the riverbank where the Lannister siege camp used to be, and the trout banners go up over their pavilions one by one until the floodplain that was recently a different color entirely is blue and red as far as the eye follows. Edmure watches each arrival from the east tower window and counts and does not say out loud what the number means to him. On the morning they are to ride, he goes down to the courtyard before dawn. The horses are already being saddled. Grooms move between them with torches, and the steam of their breath rises in the cold air. Men check their equipment with the focused quiet of soldiers before movement. The banner carriers stand near the gate with the trout standards rolled and ready, waiting for the order to unfurl them. Edmure walks through the courtyard slowly. He does not hurry. He looks at the men and the horses and the stored provisions on the wagons and the rolled pavilions and the whole material weight of what a march means. He looks at his castle one more time, the towers and the walls and the gate arch he has walked under, since he was old enough to walk under things, and he thinks, this will still be here. He is not abandoning it. He is extending it. He nods to himself and goes to find his horse. When the column is assembled and the banners are unfurled and the morning has fully committed to being morning, Edmure turns his horse to face the gathered men. He does not give them a speech about glory, because he has never found that kind of speech convincing, and he does not expect anyone else does either. He tells them plainly what he told the Blackfish weeks ago in the empty floodplain, that Jon Snow holds Winterfell with the north behind him, and that something is coming down from beyond the wall and across from beyond the narrow sea that is going to demand an answer from everyone in Westeros before long, and that the Riverlands, standing alone when that moment arrives, is not standing. It is waiting to be picked up and moved by whoever gets there first. He says the North and the Riverlands rode together once under his father's family and his sister's husband, and it ended badly, and they all know it ended badly, and he will not pretend otherwise. He says he is not asking them to forget any of it. He is asking them to decide whether the wall the Red Wedding built between North and South serves them or serves the people who built it, and if the answer is the latter, then the wall should come down. He says they are going to Winterfell to stand next to a man who held Castle Black and came back from the dead and won a battle he should have lost, and call him king. He pauses. He says that is either the best decision any of them ever made or the worst, and he is choosing to believe the former, and he would like their company for the ride. A beat of silence in the courtyard. Then someone near the middle of the column lets out a sound that is not quite a shout, more like an acknowledgement, and it moves through the men the way sounds move through groups of soldiers, practically, without theatre, the way professionals register that the situation has been assessed and a course has been set. The gates open. The column rides. The Blackfish takes his place at Edmure's right hand when they come out onto the road, and does not speak, which is all the commentary he needs to give. He is wearing plain travelling armour and sitting his horse the way men who have been riding their whole lives sit a horse, without thinking about it, as if the animal is just another part of the body. He carries no banner. He does not need one. The trout standards unfurl in the morning wind as the column reaches the King's Road. Blue and red, with the silver trout leaping. Not an army in the traditional sense. Something between a march and a declaration. They ride north. The days pass. The way days pass on the road in autumn, cold and grey and occasionally punctuated by rain, the kind of weather that is not hostile exactly, but is not encouraging either. The column makes good time. The Riverlords are not soft men. They have been at war, most of them, in one direction or another, for the better part of the last decade, and they do not complain about the roads and the cold in ways that slow anything down. Edmure rides at the head and thinks, because riding is good for thinking, and there is a great deal to think about. He thinks about Roslin and his son, who are presumably still at the Twins, which is presumably in some state of managed confusion in the absence of Walder Frey and his sons. He has sent word there. He has told Roslin he is coming for them as soon as the road north is travelled, which is a promise that sits in his chest the way promises do when you are not entirely certain you can keep them on the schedule you named. He rides faster than he might otherwise, and tells himself it is for the men's sake. He thinks about Jon Snow, whom he has never met, and what he will say when he does. He has thought about this conversation for 3 weeks on 2 continents of imagination, and he still does not have a first line that satisfies him. On the 3rd day, the column is moving through the thin scrub country north of the Trident when a figure steps off the road ahead of them. She does it quickly and without drama. One moment she is on the road, dark cloak, hood up, moving at a fast walk, going the same direction as the column. The next moment she is in the tree line off the right verge, motionless, watching. She is small enough and still enough that most of the outriders at the head of the column do not register her. They are looking for threats coming toward them, not for a lone traveller sheltering in the trees. But Edmure is watching the road as he always watches things, with the slightly distracted attention of a man who has been caught off guard too many times to stop looking, and he sees her. He sees the dark hair above the collar of the cloak. He sees her face turn toward the column, toward the banners. He does not recognize her. He watches her, watching the standards pass. Her expression from 40 feet away is not readable exactly, but something in her stillness has a weight to it. The kind of stillness that is not absence of feeling, but too much of it, held very carefully. The trout banners pass her, and she watches everyone. She does not move until the rear guard is 50 yards beyond her position. Then she steps back onto the road and continues north, the same fast walk, alone, pulling ahead of the column because she is on foot and unencumbered, and she sets a pace that suggests she has been moving like this for a long time and expects to continue. Edmure watches her go. He does not send a rider after her. The road north is free to all travelers, and a lone figure moving fast and keeping to herself on a road that leads to Winterfell is not his concern and not his business. He rides on. He does not know that what he watched from behind the dark hood was the face of the girl who killed Walder Frey. Aria Stark steps back onto the King's Road and does not look behind her. She recognized the trout the moment the first banner caught the wind. She knows that sigil. She grew up watching it. Not every day. Not in Winterfell. But on the faces of her mother's household, and on the plate at the high table at feasts, and on letters sealed with blue wax. She knows the silver trout the way you know the symbols that appeared in your life before you understood what symbols meant. Her mother's house is riding north. She does not know who leads them. She does not know what it means in the larger sense. She knows the north is in front of her, and her family is in front of her, and the man at the head of that column is going to the same place she is going, and that is enough. She does not follow the column. She has never needed a column. She moves faster alone. 2 days later, the column crests a low rise on the King's Road at the place where the land begins its slow change. The soil darker, the scrub heavier, the air carrying the first notes of the pine and peat smell. That means the north has begun. Below the rise, the road descends toward the marshes and bogs of the Neck, that flat, waterlogged country that has always been the throat of Westeros, the place where an army going south can be strangled, and an army going north can be made to feel the weight of the distance still ahead. 2 riders are waiting at the bottom of the rise. The first thing Edmure notices is how tall the one on the left sits in her saddle, taller than most men. Short blonde hair beneath a plain helmet, a sword at her back with a grip that catches the grey light in a way that says Valyrian steel to anyone who knows what Valyrian steel looks like. The Blackfish pulls up beside him and looks down at the 2 riders. "I know that woman," he says. Brienne of Tarth holds her horse steady at the base of the rise. The young man at her right, round-faced, earnest, wearing armor that is slightly too large for him, is clearly trying to project the same steadiness with less natural equipment for it. Brienne is looking up at the column, and then at the Blackfish, and then at Edmure, and she does not show what she is thinking, because Brienne of Tarth has a face built by experience into something that reveals very little. She says she is sent by Sansa Stark to escort the column to Winterfell. She says it simply, without preamble, as a statement of assignment rather than a request. The Blackfish looks at her for a long moment. He looks at the sword. He looks at the young man beside her who is working very hard not to look overwhelmed. He looks back at Brienne. He turns to Edmure and says nothing, which is the Blackfish's way of approving something he didn't think of himself. Edmure tells her she is welcome. She falls in beside them at the head of the column without another word, the way someone falls in who has already done the traveling that counts and considers this part a formality, and together they ride into the grey country of the Neck, north, toward Winterfell, the banners of the trout moving in the cold wind at their backs. King's Landing smells different now. Jaime rides through the gate in the late afternoon and feels it before he identifies it, a quality to the air that is not quite smoke anymore but carries the memory of smoke, the way a room smells after a fire has been put out but the walls have not forgotten. The city is quieter than it should be for the hour. The people in the streets move with their eyes slightly down, the particular gait of a population that has recently been reminded of something large and terrible and is still in the process of adjusting to the new shape of the world. The skyline is different. He keeps his gaze forward on the road to the Red Keep, and does not look directly at the gap where the Sept of Baelor used to stand, but he cannot stop himself from seeing it in the periphery. The absence of something that large takes time to become ordinary. His eyes keep expecting the dome and the steps and the spires and finding nothing there, and the nothing lands wrong every time. Like a missing tooth, the tongue cannot leave alone. He rides through the Red Keep's gate and hands off his horse and goes to find his sister. She's in the throne room. He had not expected her to receive him privately. He had hoped for it, in the abstract way he hopes for things these days without much conviction. But he is not surprised. She is seated in the great chair that stands before the Iron Throne, not on the throne itself, not yet, but close enough that the message is unmistakable. And there are courtiers and servants, and 2 King's Guard at their stations, and the whole formal architecture of reception in place. Which means this conversation is a performance as much as a conversation, which means every word he says will be heard and remembered and repeated. He walks the length of the hall. His boots sound on the stone. His gold hand catches the light of the torches. Cersei watches him come. Her golden hair is dressed formally. Her green eyes are steady. She is wearing black, which she has been wearing since Tommen, and it suits her in the way that things suit people when they have fully accepted something and stopped pretending they haven't. She looks like a queen. She looks like a queen who has burned her bridges so completely that the only direction left is forward. He reaches her and stands. He does not kneel. She does not ask him to. He tells her what she already knows from the raven he sent ahead, that Riverrun did not fall. And then he tells her what she does not know from the raven, because the raven was 2 weeks old by the time it arrived, and 2 weeks is a long time for situations to develop. He tells her the Frey alliance is finished. Walder Frey is dead. His sons with him. The manner of their deaths is unclear, but the results are not. The Frey soldiers who were augmenting his siege dissolved within days of the news arriving, heading east toward the twins to argue about the succession, and without them the siege was not sustainable. He tells her Edmure Tully has called his banners. He tells her the Riverlords are marching north. He tells her Jon Snow now has both the North and the Riverlands behind him. The hall is quiet when he finishes. The courtiers standing at the walls are quiet. The King's Guard are quiet. The torches make small sounds in the silence. Cersei does not say anything immediately. She looks at him the way she looks at things she is not going to show a reaction to in public. He has known that look since they were children. It is not the look that means she is calm. It is the look that means she is deciding what shape her anger will take once the room has emptied. The stillness of it, at close range, is worse than shouting. He has always found her stillness worse than shouting. She asks him one question. She asks whether Edmure Tully's host is substantial. He tells her it is not an army, but it is significant. Several hundred fighting men from the Riverlord houses, with more likely to follow as word spreads. Combined with what Jon Snow already holds, the North and the Riverlands together represent more swords than any force she can put in the field right now, without more allies than she currently has. She absorbs this. She does not look away. She says, "Find allies." She says it quietly, without theatre, as if it is a straightforward task with a straightforward answer. She says the Iron Bank will want security before they lend, and the Greyjoys have ships and reasons of their own, and there are men in the East whose loyalty can be purchased if the price is right, and she needs soldiers, real soldiers, before Daenerys Targaryen arrives with her fleet and her armies, and whatever those dragons can carry. She says all of this, and Jaime stands in front of her and hears it, and does not ask any of the questions that are occurring to him, because this is not the time, and this is not the room. He says he understands. He says he will see to it. She nods once and lets him go. He walks the length of the hall again in the other direction, and feels the eyes on his back, and does not turn around. Far to the east, somewhere on the open sea between Essos and Westeros, Tyrion Lannister is standing at the stern rail of the largest ship in the fleet, watching the water. It is a good evening for watching the water. The sea is calm and the sky is the color of iron, and somewhere ahead of them, still hours away, the Westerosi coast is making itself known in the quality of the air and the behavior of the birds. He has been on these ships long enough now that he can almost feel the land before he can see it. He has a letter in his hand. It came by means he will not describe even in his own thoughts, because he has contacts in Westeros that he has been carefully not advertising since he left, and a line of communication this useful is worth protecting with discretion. He has read it 3 times already, standing at the rail with the wind trying to take it out of his hand. Riverrun held against Jaime. He had suspected this was possible. He knows what Riverrun is, knows the castle and the rivers, knows that his brother's leverage was a single card, and if it did not play, the hand was over. What he had not fully anticipated was the cascade after. Walder Frey dead, the Riverlords calling for the north, Jon Snow sitting at Winterfell with an alliance that 2 months ago did not exist. He reads the part about Jon Snow again. Jon Snow, who was dead and came back. Jon Snow, who is being called king in the north by lords who do not bend that knee lightly, and Riverlords who have every reason to distrust anything north of the neck. Jon Snow, who is, if the pattern Tyrion is looking at means what he thinks it means, building something that is going to matter very much to Daenerys's plans when she lands at Dragonstone and starts looking at the map. He folds the letter carefully and tucks it inside his coat, close to his chest, where it will stay warm and where no one will see it. He stands at the rail a moment longer. He is the hand of the Queen. His job is to give advice. His job is to tell Daenerys the things she needs to know to make good decisions. He will tell her about this. He will, just not tonight, and not from the rail of a ship in the middle of the sea, because there is a conversation that needs to be had carefully, and this is not the setting for it. He turns away from the rail and goes below. The water behind the ship closes over itself in the dark. In King's Landing, the throne room has emptied. The courtiers are gone. The King's Guard are at their post outside the door. The torches are burning lower. Cersei is alone with the Iron Throne. She sits in the chair before it for a long time without moving. Then she stands, and she puts her hand against the arm of the throne itself. The cold metal of it, the shaped and welded swords of 1,000 years of conquest pressed together into something that cuts anyone who sits in it carelessly. She has dreamed about this since she was a girl. She has maneuvered for it, and sacrificed for it, and killed for it. She has it now. She has the title and the room, and the crown and the throne, and every formal piece of it. What she does not have is the Riverlands. What she does not have is the North. What she does not have is her children, or her father, or the High Sparrow, or the Tyrells, or the Freys. All gone in one season, the whole architecture of alliances and enemies and complicated understandings that held the realm in a kind of terrible balance, gone. What she has is this room, and Jaime, and Qyburn, and the Lannister name. She presses her palm against the cold metal and holds it there. She is not afraid. She has never been afraid of the right things, but she can feel the weight of what she is holding in a way she could not feel it before, when there were other hands helping her carry it. The throne is heavier than she expected. The room is quieter than it should be. She takes her hand away. She goes to find Qyburn. There are things that need doing, and she is the only person left to do them. And that has always been the truth about her, even if she is only now arriving at the full version of it. The torches burn on in the empty hall. The Iron Throne sits in the firelight, patient, waiting for whoever comes next. Jon rides south on a grey morning with 10 men at his back and Petter Baelish at his side, because Baelish had been in the yard when the horses were being saddled and had asked, with the pleasant expression of a man making a reasonable request, whether there was room in the escort for one more. Jon had said yes. He has been saying yes to Baelish in the way you say yes to things that would take more energy to refuse than to allow, and telling himself he will deal with that tendency at some point when there is time for it, which there has not yet been. They ride south through the neck. It is flat country, the neck, flat and wet and ancient, threaded with causeways and reed beds and bogs that look like solid ground until they are not. The road is good where it holds, and treacherous where it does not, and the cold here is a different kind of cold than Winterfell, damper, lower, the kind that works itself into joints and does not leave until spring. The mist sits on the water either side of the road, and the horizon is close and featureless, and the whole place has the quality of a threshold, which it is. It is the throat of the continent, the point where the north begins and the rest of Westeros ends. Jon has ridden through it before. It always feels like crossing something. They hear the column before they see it, the muffled sound of many horses on a soft road, the low talk of men, the creak of wagons. Then the vanguard comes around a long bend in the causeway, and the column resolves out of the mist, and Jon pulls up his horse, and the escorts with him. And for a moment both sides look at each other from 100 yards, with the instinctive caution that comes from being soldiers on a road in uncertain times. Then the Tully banners clear the mist, and Jon sees the blue and red and the silver trout, and he breathes out. A rider comes forward from the head of the column, and Jon rides to meet him. And that is how he meets Edmure Tully, in the middle of a bog road, with the mist at their backs and 10 men watching from either side. Edmure Tully is a man who looks like he has been through things and has not been reduced by them, which is rarer than it sounds. He is not young. He is not old. He has the look of someone who has been tested hard enough to show what is underneath, and what is underneath is not soft. Jon takes this in during the first few seconds and adjusts his estimate of the man accordingly. Edmure looks at Jon. Jon is younger than Edmure expected. He is not sure why he expected different. He knew the ages, had heard the stories, but there is a difference between knowing a man retook Winterfell and stood against an army of the dead, and seeing him on a horse in the neck, and reconciling those two things into one person. He looks young in the particular way of men who have been through too much too fast, where the youth of the face and the weight behind the eyes do not entirely match. Neither of them speaks immediately. It is Jon who says it first. He says he is grateful. He says it plainly, because he doesn't know Edmure Tully well enough to dress it in anything else. He says Riverrun held when it did not have to, and the march north cost time and men and political capital, and he does not take it lightly. Edmure listens to this. He looks at Jon for a moment longer. He says, "Do not thank him yet." He says he has been riding for 2 weeks, and he has not seen Winterfell, and he does not know what he is walking into, and he has been in that position before, and it did not end well, and he wants to see the walls, and meet the lords, and understand what he is pledging before they call it a debt paid. He says it without challenge, just as a statement of what is true. Jon nods. He says that is fair. Behind Jon, Sansa Stark nudges her horse forward past the escort line. She does not say anything as she rides toward the column. She has been in the escort, but she has been in the back of it, and she has been quiet the whole ride down, which Jon had read as wariness and had not pressed. He watches her ride forward now and doesn't stop her, because the look on her face is not wariness. It is something else, something more specific. She reaches the space between the two parties and pulls up her horse 10 feet from Edmure. She looks at him. The auburn hair is loose today, under a plain grey hood, copper dark in the wet morning, and her eyes are blue and very still. She has her mother's colouring. She has always had her mother's colouring, but here, on this road, in this light, with this man in front of her, the resemblance does something that resemblances in the ordinary course of things do not do. Edmure Tully goes very still. He is not looking at Sansa. He is looking at something behind Sansa, that Sansa is carrying in her face without knowing it. The colour of the hair, the line of the jaw, the blue eyes, and the way they hold themselves, the quality of them, the specific thing about Catelyn Tully's eyes that Edmure has not seen in anything or anyone since the last time he saw his sister alive at a wedding table that should not have ended the way it did. He does not speak. Sansa dismounts. She does it quietly, without ceremony, the way you do something when the ceremony would diminish it. She stands in the road with her boots in the mud and she looks up at him. She says, "Uncle." It is one word. It is enough. Edmure Tully gets down off his horse. He is not a demonstrative man, or he has not let himself be, for a long time, in the circumstances of his life over the past years where demonstration was a vulnerability. He stands in front of her, and he does not know what to do with his hands, and he does not do anything with them. He just stands there, a foot away from her, and looks at her face. When he speaks, his voice is rough in the way voices get when something is working against them from the inside. He tells her her mother would have been glad to see her standing. He says standing like it means more than standing. It does. Sansa closes her eyes for a moment, opens them. She does not cry. She has learned, over the years, in the houses and the rooms, and the specific situations she has been in, not to cry when she does not want to show it. And she does not want to show it here, not on a road in the neck with 2 columns of men watching from 40 yards. But she lets herself absorb it. She lets herself receive it, his voice saying that, the weight of what it means that he came, that he is here, that someone who remembers her mother by something other than the way she died is standing in front of her in the cold. She says, "She would have been glad to see you too." Edmure nods. He cannot do much more than that. Behind them, the column and the escort are quiet in the way soldiers get quiet when they know they are witnessing something that does not belong to them. The Blackfish is at the head of the Riverlord column, looking at the reeds beside the road, which is one way of giving people a moment. Brienne of Tarth sits straight on her horse at the outer edge of the column, and she looks at the exchange. And then she looks away, because she recognizes something in it that belongs to her own grief in a different form. And she has never been the type to stare at grief that does not belong to her. Jon Snow watches. He watches Edmure and Sansa standing in the road, and he feels the shape of something that he has not been able to name since the night he rode back through Winterfell's gates and looked at the hall where Robb Stark grew up and stood in the place where the king in the north used to live. The Riverlands and the north rode together once. They rode together because Robb needed them, and Catelyn Tully was lord of a castle that could give him what he needed, and the alliance was made. It cost Robb everything. It cost Catelyn everything. It cost Edmure his freedom for years, and his family's seat, and his wedding night, and his sister. And here he is anyway, standing in the neck with his banners at his back. Jon thinks about Robb, about the stories Robb used to tell about the Riverlands, about the war, about riding south and the thing it felt like to have an army behind you for the first time. Robb was proud of that, in the way he was proud of things, not boasting, just quietly, knowing the weight of it. He never came back. Jon looks at Sansa and Edmure and thinks, this is the North acknowledging what Robb paid for. This is the account being settled, not in gold, but in presence. He looks away before it gets too much to hold. Petyr Baelish is at the edge of Jon's escort line, sitting very still on his horse, watching the reunion with the expression of a man at a card game who has just seen an opponent turn over a hand he didn't expect. He watches Sansa say uncle. He watches Edmure's face when he hears it. He watches the column of men behind Edmure, the lords who came because Edmure called them, who are loyal to Edmure, who followed him north because he held a castle and then chose the north over a river crossing, and he does the arithmetic of what that means for the room at Winterfell. He had been thinking of Sansa as a figure in a particular balance, a young woman recently widowed of the worst marriage in the Seven Kingdoms, with no family left to anchor her, in a castle full of lords who did not entirely trust her or her half-brother, dependent on the protection he had bought with 30,000 Vale swords. That was the balance. That was the leverage. That balance has just changed. She has an uncle now. She has Riverlords who came north at her uncle's call. She has standing that does not pass through Petyr Baelish. He does not show any of this on his face. His expression does not change. He files it away with the careful precision of someone who files everything away. He will need a new approach. He has time to find one. He always has time. Jon gives the column a few minutes before he rides forward again, and then they turn north together, the king's escort and the Riverlord host and the Tully banners moving in the neck's wet wind, and the two parties become one column on the road, heading toward Winterfell, and the mist closes behind them over the empty causeway. Edmure rides at Jon's left, the Blackfish at his right, Sansa in the center, between her king and her uncle. They do not talk much as they ride. There is time for talking later, when there is a fire and a hall, and the mud of the road is off their boots. For now it is enough to be moving, all of them, in the same direction. The great hall of Winterfell holds more people than it has held in years. The northern lords are on one side of the long tables, and the Riverlords are on the other, which was not arranged deliberately, but happened the way these things happen when men who have complicated histories are put in the same room and left to seat themselves. They are not hostile. They are careful. There is a difference. Careful is what people are when they remember something clearly and are trying to figure out how much of it to carry into the present moment. The memory of the Red Wedding is in this room in the way that certain memories are in rooms, not spoken, not displayed, but present the way a smell is present, underneath everything, noticed by everyone, commented on by no one. These men rode together once. Some of them were at the Twins. Most of them lost people who were. The Riverlands and the North together means the War of 5 Kings and what the War of 5 Kings cost and the specific manner in which it ended. And none of that has been processed the way grief is supposed to be processed, in time and quiet and the company of people who understand. It has been carried instead the way soldiers carry things, strapped down, moved with, never fully put away. Jon sits at the high table. He is watching the room the way he has learned to watch rooms, not performing watchfulness, but actually watching, the grey eyes moving from face to face and taking notes. Sansa is at his right. Lyanna Mormont is 4 seats down. Petter Baelish is standing at the wall. Edmure Tully stands up. The room goes quiet in stages, table by table, the way rooms go quiet when someone stands who has earned silence. He stands at the Riverlord side of the table, and he does not look at his notes, because he did not write notes, because he has known what he was going to say since the morning the Lannister camp went quiet, and he stood in the empty floodplain and looked north. He names the Red Wedding. He does not circle around it or soften its edges. He says its name, and he says what it was, and he does not look at the floor while he says it. He says he was there. He says he was married at those tables and woke in a dungeon before his wedding night was finished, and spent the years after in a Frey cell being used as a hostage against a castle that his uncle held for as long as a man could hold it. He says he was a weapon pointed at his own family. He says he knows that. He has always known that. He has been deciding for some time what to do with the knowledge, and what he has decided is this. He is here. He names what was done in the name of the Iron Throne and the alliances that served it. He names Walder Frey and the Lannisters who sanctioned it, and the machine of power that found it useful to break the thing the Riverlands and the North had built together. He says he is not going to pretend the last 6 years did not happen, because pretending does not serve either side, and there are too many people in this room who know better. He is not asking anyone to forgive. He is asking them to decide. He says Jon Snow held the wall and held Castle Black and won Winterfell and was called King in the North by lords who do not use that word carelessly. He says a man who has done those things and who holds the North and is prepared to stand against what is coming from the east and from beyond, the wall deserves to know whether the Riverlands are standing with him or waiting to see how it goes. He pauses. He says the Riverlands are not waiting to see how it goes. He draws his sword. He does not raise it. He sets it flat on the table in front of Jon Snow with both hands, the way you place something you have carried for a long time on the surface where it belongs. The blade catches the torchlight. The hall is completely silent. Then the Riverlords rise. It doesn't happen in unison. It moves down the table the way the coronation did. One man, then another, then another. But it is faster this time, less deliberate, as if the decision has already been made, and the gesture is only catching up to it. Swords on the table or raised to the rafters. The sound of steel on wood and steel in air fills the hall and goes up into the cold above the torches. The northern lords are standing too. Not because they were told to, because the room asked it of them and they answered. And this is what that looks like. 2 sides of a table that did not fully trust each other an hour ago, standing in the same direction, the sound of all of it overhead like weather. Jon Snow stands up. He is better at this than he was at the coronation. He has had weeks of practice being a king, and he has been paying attention, which is how Jon Snow has always done things, by paying attention to what is in front of him, and trying not to pretend he understands more than he does. He looks down the table at Edmure Tully's sword lying flat before him, and he does not take it immediately. He looks at it for a moment. Then he picks it up. He holds it with both hands and turns it once in the torchlight, and then he lays it back in front of Edmure's empty seat, which means, this stays yours. This is not a surrender. This is a choice. He says the Riverlands' debts to the North and the North's debts to the Riverlands are old and complicated, and he will not stand here and pretend they balance cleanly. He says what he will say is this: the North remembers. And what the North remembers now is that Edmure Tully held a castle and chose this road when other roads were open to him, and that is not nothing. He says that is not a small thing in a world where people mostly take the easier road. He names Edmure Tully Warden of the Riverlands under the king in the north. He says it plainly, the way you name things that did not exist before this moment, and do now. The hall puts the title in its memory. Edmure Tully sits back down. 4 seats away from the high table, Lyanna Mormont has been watching all of this with the undivided attention of someone who has decided to be in every room she enters at full force, and has been that way since she understood what rooms are for. She is small in her chair, and entirely undiminished by it. When Edmure returns his gaze to the table and meets her eyes across the width of it, she looks at him for a moment with an expression that is not warmth exactly. It is something more austere than warmth. And she nods. It is the nod one soldier gives another when the action taken was correct and the cost was paid, and no further comment is required. Edmure holds her gaze and nods back. Bear Island sent 62 men when Lyanna Mormont wrote that letter. 62 men and 1 girl who understood what fighting meant better than men 3 times her age. He does not know the number, but he knows the look. The hall begins to empty in the way halls empty after ceremonial moments, gradually, in conversation, with the particular release of tension that follows formality. Men who were sitting across the tables from each other, carefully, are now moving through the same space and finding it easier. The wine is being poured. The torches are burning lower and warmer. Sansa waits until most of the hall has thinned before she moves toward the corridor. She has been managing what is in her face all evening, which is not a new skill for her, but is tiring, and she is looking forward to the 10 minutes she will allow herself before the next thing requires her attention. She is in the passage outside the hall, where the torches are fewer and the cold is more, when she hears footsteps behind her. She does not stop walking. Petyr Baelish falls into step beside her. He is pleasant, as he always is in these moments, pleasant in the way that very sharp instruments are sometimes pleasant before you understand what they are for. He says the evening went well. He says the Riverlords are a fine addition, excellent, the Riverlands in the fold. Who could have predicted it? He says Jon Snow must be pleased. She says nothing. He says he only wants to mention, as a friend, that Jon now has the attention of every enemy in Westeros simultaneously. Cersei, who is looking for allies and finding them. Daenerys, who is landing at Dragonstone with dragons and an army and her own idea of who should rule. And the thing beyond the wall, which does not distinguish between kings. He says this: by the way, with all respect to Edmure Tully's Riverlords, is not a military situation that river banners resolve. He says the force that turned the Battle of the Bastards is still the only southern cavalry standing between Winterfell and anything that comes from the south or west. He says it helpfully, informatively, as if he is sharing a fact she might not have noticed. Sansa stops walking. She turns and looks at him. He is exactly the same height as always, the dark hair and the pointed beard, and the eyes that are always doing 2 things at once. She has been in enough rooms with him to have learned the difference between what he says and what he means, and she has been learning that difference since she was old enough to learn anything, and she knows what this is. She tells him she will be sure to pass his concern along to Jon. She holds his gaze for one measured second. Then she turns and walks away. Behind her, the passage goes quiet. Petyr Baelish stands in it for a moment. He does not call after her. He looks at the empty corridor where she was, and he almost smiles, not in victory, not in defeat, but in the way of a man who has just confirmed something he suspected and is updating his thinking accordingly. She is not naive. She has not been naive for some time. He has known this. He has been telling himself the naivety would return when she was comfortable, when the immediate danger passed, when she had time to be a girl again instead of a survivor. She is not going to be a girl again. He has underestimated the speed at which she has become something else. He files this away. He adjusts. He has been doing this his whole life, adjusting to rooms that do not cooperate, finding to the new leverage when the old leverage moves. There is always something. There is always a way in. He walks back toward the great hall, where the wine is still being poured and the fires are still burning, and where the new shape of the north and the Riverlands together is still settling into what it will be. He thinks he has time. He is not wrong about that. But he is not as right about it as he believes. The fleet comes out of the eastern dark before dawn. There are more ships than the horizon can hold cleanly, and the sound of them precedes them, the creak of timber and the movement of water under 1,000 hulls. And by the time the sky begins to lighten over Westeros, the fleet is there, black against the grey, and Dragonstone is in front of them. Daenerys Targaryen stands at the prow of the largest ship and does not move. She has been standing there since the watch before dawn. The silver gold of her hair moves in the sea wind. Her violet eyes are fixed on the shape that is resolving out of the dark, the black rock and the fortress that grew from it, the towers carved to look like dragons coiling out of the stone, and the bridges arching between them, and the whole ancient impossible structure clinging to its island above the churning sea below. She has never seen it. She was born here. She was carried out of here as an infant on the last ship before the city fell to Robert Baratheon's forces, and she has been told its shape all her life by Viserys, by Ser Jorah, by every Targaryen loyalist who ever described it to her as the thing she was owed. But she has never seen it, and the telling is not the same as the seeing, and she is learning that right now, standing at the prow in the cold with the sea on all sides, and the fortress coming toward her. Behind her, Tyrion Lannister stands near the mainmast and watches her and does not speak. He has learned when to give her moments. She has them less often than you might think, given what her life has been, the losses and the decisions and the accumulated weight of ruling something. But when they come, they are real, and he respects them. He watches the fortress and thinks his own thoughts, which is one of the luxuries of being around someone who does not need your commentary to understand what she is looking at. The ships anchor in the bay. The longboats go down. Daenerys steps off the longboat and onto the black sand alone. She walks a few steps and then stops. She looks at the sand. Then she kneels, both knees, and she presses one hand into it. Flat-palmed, the sand cold and damp and volcanic dark under her fingers. She stays like that for a moment, feeling the island through her hand, the ground of the place she was born, and has been approaching her whole life. Tyrion steps off the boat behind her. He watches this. He has followed her long enough to know that this is not performance. This is a woman putting her hand on something real after years of reaching toward a symbol of it. And those two things are different, and she is understanding right now how different they are. She stands up. She looks at the fortress. She walks toward it without looking back. Inside, the castle is cold and empty. The corridors are stone, and the banners that hang in them are old and faded. Stannis Baratheon's stag long since lost its colors. She walks through it and looks at things and does not say much. Tyrion follows and says nothing, which for Tyrion is a significant discipline. She finds the war chamber on her own. The room is round, and the table in it is the whole of the room. Almost. A massive carved thing. A map of Westeros rendered in stone at a scale that means you can walk from the neck to the Dornish marches in 3 steps. She stands at the edge of it and looks at it, and then slowly walks its perimeter, looking at the carved coastlines and the names of the rivers and the great castles and the mountain ranges. She looks at the north for a long time. Tyrion has been waiting for this moment. He tells her there is something she needs to see. He sets the letter on the table, the one from Chapter 8's crossing, the one he tucked inside his coat and has been carrying since the sea, and he summarizes it, because he knows she prefers the summary to the original, when the original is written by someone who does not know he is writing for her. He tells her about Jon Snow. He tells her Jon Snow holds Winterfell, and the Northern Lords have called him king in the north, which she knew or knew the outline of. He tells her what she didn't know, that a Riverlord named Edmure Tully held Riverrun against Jaime Lannister's siege, refused to surrender, and when the Frey alliance collapsed after Walder Frey's death, chose to march his Riverlords north to pledge them to Jon Snow's banner. He tells her the Riverlands and the North are a combined block now, and that block is larger than anything Cersei can put in the field without new allies. Daenerys looks at the map. She finds the Riverlands with her eyes, and then finds the North above it, and stands there, looking at how much of the carved table that represents. She asks Tyrion what he knows about Jon Snow. He is honest. He tells her what he knows, and names what he does not know, and doesn't pretend the two are the same size, which is one of the things she values about him. He says Jon Snow was a bastard of House Stark, who rose to Lord Commander of the Night's Watch by earning it rather than inheriting it. He says the Night's Watch mutinied against him and killed him, and he came back from that. Though the how of it is something he can only tell her second-hand, and is frankly not certain he believes entirely. He says Jon Snow fought a battle at Winterfell against Ramsay Bolton with fewer men than he needed, and won it by luck and timing. He says the Northern Lords named him king afterward, which the North does not do casually with men they do not fully mean it about. He pauses. He says he does not know what Jon Snow wants beyond the North. He says the man has not, as far as anyone can tell, made any claim to any throne south of Winterfell, and Edmure Tully's pledge is a pledge to a king in the North, not to a king of anything else. Daenerys listens to all of this without moving. She looks at the map. She looks at where the North is, and where Dragonstone is, and how many miles of Westeros lie between them, and what lies in those miles in terms of armies and castles and the cold mathematics of war. She says Jon Snow is not her enemy. She says it the way you say something that is a calculation as much as a statement. She says he holds the North and the Riverlands, and that is significant, and she would rather have his swords beside her than in front of her. She says any man who has held the wall and won Winterfell and drawn the Riverlands to him understands something about how Westeros works in the current moment, and those are exactly the qualities she needs on her side. She pauses. She says, if he bends the knee. Tyrion looks at the map and does not say anything for a moment. He thinks several things, none of which he says out loud. He thinks about what he knows of Jon Snow from the letter, and what he knows of Daenerys from 3 years of close observation, and what he knows about the particular problem of asking a man who has been called king in the north to bend a knee to anyone. He says, "That conversation will need to be handled carefully." Daenerys almost smiles. She says she handles most things carefully. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister receives her own intelligence at roughly the same hour, a raven from a ship's captain in Blackwater Bay, who was close enough to see the fleet's flags. She is in the solar with Jaime when the raven arrives. He reads it first and sets it in front of her. He says, "Now there are 2. She picks up the raven and reads it, and sets it down. She says, "There is only ever one." He looks at her. She says it again, more quietly, to herself as much as to him. There is only ever one problem at a time. The problem changes, but the shape of it does not. Someone wants what you have, and you have to decide whether to give it or hold it. And she has been deciding that question her whole life, and she has never given anything she did not have to give, and she does not intend to start. She means Daenerys. She also means Jon Snow. She also means everyone. Jaime watches her face and does not say what he is thinking. Back at Dragonstone, the afternoon is cold and the sea below the cliffs is loud. Daenerys stands at the edge of the highest promontory and looks out at the water. The fleet is anchored in the bay below. The Unsullied are already moving from the ships to the shore in their disciplined columns. The Dothraki are louder about the whole thing. The Greyjoy ships ride at anchor at the outer edge of the bay. She does not look at any of this. She looks up. Drogon is circling the island. He has been circling since they arrived, black against the grey sky, the wingspan vast enough to darken a patch of cloud when he passes over it. He dips and tilts and rises on the thermals, moving with the ease of something that has never had to justify what it is or ask permission for where it goes. He is the largest of the 3. The other 2 are somewhere in the airspace over the fleet. She can hear them. But Drogon circles the island. She watches him for a long time. She watches him the way she watches things she loves, which is not softly. She does not love things softly, but with the full weight of attention. That means, I see you completely, and I am not looking away. He circles once more, and then banks toward the far side of the island, riding the wind east. She turns away from the cliff. She goes inside to plan. The great hall is quiet after midnight. The lords have gone to their chambers, and the servants have banked the fires, and the last of the wine has been cleared from the tables. 2 torches still burn near the high end of the hall, throwing low amber light across the stone and the empty chairs and the long shadow of the table. Jon Snow sits in the chair at the head of it. Edmure Tully sits 4 chairs down, which is the distance that feels right. Close enough to talk, far enough to think. Neither of them was ready to sleep. They have been in the same rooms and on the same roads for 2 weeks now, and this is the first time there has been no ceremony around it. No lords watching, no banners, no one performing anything. Just 2 men and a dying fire and the particular quiet of a castle after everyone else has gone to bed. Jon pours 2 cups from the jug the servants left and pushes one down the table. They start with practical things, because that is where you start when you are not sure yet of the territory. Edmure asks about the supply situation in the north. Jon tells him honestly. It is not good, and it will get worse in winter. And adding several hundred Riverlords to Winterfell's household has not improved the arithmetic, though he is not saying that as a complaint. Edmure says he knows, and that he sent a raven to the Riverlord stewards before leaving, and there will be provisions moving north by the end of the fortnight. Jon nods. They talk about the Vale forces. Jon says Baelish has given no indication of withdrawing them, and every indication of considering them a permanent feature of the landscape, which is a problem he has not yet resolved. Edmure says he noticed the way Baelish watches Sansa, and that he would like it noted that he noticed. Jon says he has noticed too. They let the subject rest there, which is all it needs for now. Jon asks whether Brienne of Tarth reports to him or to Sansa. Edmure thinks about this for a moment. He says, to Sansa, probably, which means effectively to both of them, which is probably how Sansa wants it. Jon almost smiles. He says that is about right. The fire settles. The hall is very quiet. Then Edmure sets down his cup and looks at Jon, the way he has been looking at him for 2 weeks, that measuring, honest look, and he says the thing that has been in the air between them since the neck. He says this is not a kingdom anymore. He says, Jon holds the north. He holds the Riverlands. Daenerys Targaryen is at Dragonstone with 3 dragons and the largest army that has come to Westeros in living memory, and Cersei Lannister sits on the Iron Throne with the gold of Casterly Rock and nothing else, and the whole of Westeros is choosing sides right now, whether it wants to or not. He says the thing people choose in a moment like this is not really sides. It is what they believe the world should look like when the choosing is done. He says he made his choice. He wants to know Jon Snow's. Jon looks at the fire. He says he did not want to be king. He says it simply, without apology or performance, because he is past the point of apologizing for it and has never been the type to perform. He says he went to the Wall because it was the place where the thing that needed doing was being done, and nobody with the skill to do it was doing it well enough. And then it kept being the place where the thing that needed doing was happening, and now he is sitting in his father's chair. He stops on that word, moves past it. In Ned Stark's chair, and the North has given him a name he does not feel he has earned, and he is still not sure the right person is sitting in the right chair. Edmure listens to all of this. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says that may be exactly why he should be sitting in it. He says the men who are certain they should be king are the ones who want the chair. He says he has known a few of those men, and he would not choose any of them over a man who sits in the chair because someone has to, and he is the person who was there. He says Jon Snow was there. He was there at the Wall, and he was there at Winterfell, and he is there now, and that is not a small thing, even if it does not feel like enough. Jon looks at him. He does not say anything for a moment. Then he says, "Thank you." He means it in the way of a person who has been told something they needed to hear and knows it. The commotion at the gate comes a half-hour later. They hear it before anyone brings word. The voices in the yard, the sound of a horse ridden hard coming to a stop, the specific urgency of boots on stone that means someone is moving fast with purpose. Jon is on his feet before the door opens. The messenger is from the Wall. He is cold and tired and has been riding since yesterday, and he stands in the doorway of the great hall and says Bran Stark is alive. He crossed back through the Wall. He is coming south with Meera Reed. He will be at Winterfell in 3 or 4 days. Jon goes very still. Sansa is in the doorway behind the messenger, wrapped in a dark cloak, woken by the noise. She looks at Jon's face, and then she looks at her hands for a moment, which is what she does when she is holding something she does not want to put down in public. They are both thinking about Rickon. They do not say his name. They do not need to. He is there anyway, in the space between them, in the shape of what it means that one came back and one did not, in the grief that does not resolve, but relocates, and lives alongside the relief. Jon asks the messenger if Bran is well. The messenger says he is alive and moving. He says, and here he pauses, choosing his words, that he seems different than when he went north. He says it carefully, like a man reporting something he does not fully understand. Jon nods. He thanks the man and tells him to eat and sleep. Bran arrives on the 4th day. He comes in a cart, lying on a litter. The way he has been moved since the fall that changed everything. He is not the boy Jon remembers. He is the right age, and he has the right face, and the dark hair is the same. But something behind the eyes is not the same. His eyes are open and present, and looking at everything, but looking at it the way something very old looks at things that are still young, with a patience that does not belong to a boy of his years, and a distance behind the attention, as if he is watching the immediate world from a place slightly back and to the side of it. Jon gets him down from the cart himself. He wraps his arms around his brother and holds him, and Bran holds him back, and for a moment it is just that. 2 brothers, the dead wall and the years between them, the weight of everything that happened and everything they survived. Sansa is there, her eyes bright, not looking away. When Jon steps back, Bran looks at him. It is a long look. Jon does not know what to do with it. Bran says, "You look like him." Jon asks who. Bran does not answer. He looks at Sansa and then around at the courtyard and then back at Jon. And he says he is tired from the road and he would like to rest, and Jon helps the men carry him inside. That evening, Jon goes to the Godswood. He goes because it is the place he has always gone when he needs to think without anyone watching, which is a need that does not go away when you become king. It only gets more pressing. The weirwood stands in the dark, the white bark pale and the carved face watching, and the red leaves hang perfectly still in the windless air of the enclosed yard. He is standing there for a few minutes when he hears the wheels of Bran's chair on the path. He does not ask how Bran knew he was here. He is not sure he wants to know how Bran knew. Bran comes to rest beside him under the weirwood. He looks up at the carved face, and then he looks at Jon, and he does it with that same quality of the long look, the look that is working from information Jon does not have access to. The silence between them is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of people who grew up in the same house and do not need to feel quiet in order to occupy the same space. Then Bran speaks. He says, "There are things I have seen, Jon. Things about you." He says it quietly, looking at the weirwood rather than at Jon. He says he does not know how to tell it yet. He says he is still finding the shape of it, which is not a thing he can explain and does not try to. He says he will. He looks at Jon then, directly, the strange, patient eyes in his brother's young face. He says, "I will tell you. When I know how." Jon looks at him for a moment. He does not ask. He is not sure he wants to know. He has learned, in the last months, that the things you are not sure you want to know tend to find you eventually regardless. And when they do, the not wanting does not protect you, only delays you, and the delay is rarely worth it. He knows this. He does not ask anyway. He looks up at the weirwood. The carved face looks back, which is what it has always done. The red leaves hang perfectly still. They stay there for a while in the quiet, the 2 of them, and the night settles around Winterfell, and above the towers the banners of the trout and the direwolf move together in the same cold wind. The fish of the Riverlands and the wolf of the north, side by side on the battlements of the oldest castle in the kingdom, waiting for whatever comes next. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond,